Are you ready for why children misbehave? When Kevin was just probably 9 years of age, the girls had gone off to school with their dad. Kevin started school just a little later. So about as the girls left, I turned to Kevin and I said, Kevin, I know I need to take you to school in the next 20 minutes, but I need help from you. This place is a mess. And please help me clean it up before we head to school. Kevin, at 9 years of age, looked at me and he said, Mom, how much will you give me? Well, I wasn't ready for dishing the money out at 7:30, a quarter to 8 in the morning. So I said to Kevin, Kevin, for everything you do for me, I will give you a hug. Aren't you a lucky boy? You get a hug from Mom for everything you do. And his little jaw dropped, and he said, Mom, that's not enough. I said, well, honey, that's a lot. No, Mom, that's not enough. Okay, I said, all right, I'll give you a little bit more. For everything you do for me, I'll not only give you a hug, but I'll also give you a kiss. Aren't you a lucky kid? And he looked at me, his little jaw dropped again, and he said, Mom, that's not enough either. Okay, I thought, enough of this sweet stuff. I'm going to go in a different direction. And I said, okay, Kevin, for everything you do for me, I'll not only give you a hug and a kiss, but I'm also going to give you and at that moment, I had no idea what I was going to say. But it popped in my head, and out came, I'm not only going to give you a hug and a kiss, but I'm also going to give you a kick in the pants. And he looked at me as if his mom, he looked at me as if his mom had just gone bananas. And he said, that's not enough either. But I could tell he was breaking. So I said, okay, Kevin, this is it. I'll not only give you a hug and a kiss and a kick in the pants, but I'll also give you a nibble on the ear. He looked at me once more and he said, I'll take it. You didn't want to go in this direction any further. And so he said, what do you want me to do? I said, honey, go make your bed. He ran in there. He made his bed. He came running out. And he said, Mom, give it to me. And I hugged him, and I kissed him, and I reached around and tapped his little behind, and I started to nibble his ear. He squirmed away, and he said, what else do you want me to do? You know, I got more work out of that boy in the next 20 minutes than I'd ever gotten out of him. Now, if I would go around the world, as people would say, how do you get your kids to be responsible? How do you get them to do the work around the house, you know? And say, oh, well, it's easy. You just give them a hug and a kiss and a kick in the pants and maybe a nibble on the ear. What would people think? But folks, I learned something in that situation. I learned that discipline doesn't need to be harsh. It doesn't need to be punitive. Discipline means to teach. To teach the child the way you want him to go. And sometimes doing something unexpected, sometimes playing with your kids, it's amazing what God can give you as a creative way to break the tension in a situation in order to get the kid to do what you want him to do. So that was my lesson that I learned, and then began a long-term research of finding out what people could do to get their kids to do what you wanted them to do without force and manipulation and spanking and harsh consequences and long timeouts and all those negative things that kids hate, but that we know that because we love them, we need to punish them. Is that what the Bible says? Those who the Lord loves, he punishes. Just a minute, come on. Help me out. What is the wording? He chastens. And if you look that up in most of the modern versions where they have looked that word up in terms of the true meaning of that word, it says he corrects. He teaches. He helps people learn why that's not a great idea. So those whom the Lord loves, he will take the time to give you the situations to help you to learn the lessons that you need to learn so you can choose without force and manipulation to do what you ought to do. So that's what we want to do with our children. Now, sometimes it's tough, and we get frustrated, and our anger is up to here, and all we can think of is what they deserve, how they deserve to be treated. And Ellen White, which is a great model for all of us, has made a comment in a book that was written years ago, or that she has, that I have held on to, that people all over the country, in terms of psychologists and educators, have said, where did you get such a wise word of knowledge about whether or not you should spank a child? And I said, well, it came from this book. You know, it was written in 1899 or something like that. I mean, it was early, folks. And this is her comment. A whipping, now we usually don't use that word today. We say spanking, whooping, maybe. But a whipping may be necessary when other resorts fail, when milder resorts fail. But now listen to this. But hopefully, one such experience should teach the children that they do not hold the reins of control. I'm not going to ask how many have gone over the limit. I'd be the first one to raise my hand, okay? But there is the principle that we need to hold on to. All right? One such experience, hopefully one such experience will be enough to teach the child that he does not hold the reins of control. All right? So what I'm going to give you today are a number of things that you can do to teach your children that they do not hold the reins of control. So here we go. The number one reason why children misbehave is because their love cups are empty. Wouldn't you know I would go there first? They want attention. They want somebody to play with them, do something with them, talk to them. And if they don't get attention by being positive, they will go to the negative and get attention for being negative. But whatever negative attention they get, as rewarding as it might be, because they will take attention, negative attention rather than no attention at all, they are soon drained out again, and they do something else. And children who are starved for love very often become the kids in the classroom who show off to get attention, who tease others to get attention, who bully others to get attention. And they become miserable kids to live with if they're constantly acting out in order to get somebody to pay attention to them. So we need to remember that when a child does something wrong, the first question we need to ask ourselves is, how much of attention have we been spending with this child? Hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day? How much positive have we been this child? And if we have been busy, if we come home from work, if we immediately put our nose into the newspaper or our eyes onto the television, and we haven't spent any positive, quality, focused attention on our children, then the first thing you need to do is say, honey, I think your love cup is empty. Let me give you a hug and fill you to overflowing, because I know you can't really be loving to others if you're empty. And spend some time with them. I was teaching a graduate school, Loma Linda University. A graduate nurse came into my class after I told about the love cup. I was trying to help medical professionals understand what they can do to help others feel this sense of belonging. And basically, what you heard this morning, the importance of caring, respecting, accepting, forgiving, and trusting, was what I was teaching at Loma Linda. And so when she heard about the Love Cup, she went home, had a 5-year-old son, and she told him about the Love Cup. And the next week, she came back to class and said, Dr. K, you will not believe what's happening at our house. And I said, well, what's happening? And she said, well, our 5-year-old has total control. And I said, what do you mean your 5-year-old has total control? She said, well, it's the Love Cup thing. I told him about that, and he was trying to play with his little 2-year-old sister, and I'll tell you, she has ADD. She's really hard to get along with, he came over to me while I was trying to study, and he said, Mommy, Missy's getting into my things, and Missy won't let me, and so I just said to him, sweetheart, remember what I told you about the Love Cup. When somebody becomes miserable and they start doing things to you that makes you unhappy, it's probably because their love cup is empty. And so Mom said, maybe try to think of something that could fill Missy up. Without her giving suggestions, this little boy ran in, got his brand new coloring book, his brand new crayons, and immediately sat down with his little sister, and they colored for the next hour together. Now, he would have never, ever done that unless he had a mission that he was going to fill his little sister's love cup up, And he thought of the most fun thing he could think of in order to do it that night. After supper, Mother went back in the bedroom. She was the university student, the graduate student. So Dad was cleaning up the kitchen. And a few minutes later, in comes the little 5-year-old to the bedroom. And he says, Mommy, Daddy's emptying my love cup. And Mommy said, sweetheart, you know what I told you. When somebody becomes miserable and starts emptying your love cup, it's probably because their love cup is empty. And he said, you mean Daddy has a love cup too? A few minutes later, she didn't tell him anything in terms of what to do. A few minutes later, she heard in the kitchen, Daddy, I love you so much. And Daddy, can I help you put the dishes in the dishwasher? She said, our family is significantly different this week because our 5-year-old son has learned to fill our love cups. So if you can remember this technique, let me tell you, folks, it works. Now this, I'm not talking about discipline. What I'm talking about is a precursor to discipline or correction, maybe I should say. Because you cannot safely correct anyone, whether it's your mother, or your husband, or your children. You cannot safely correct anyone unless you first fill their love cups up. Okay? Because when somebody has an empty love cup and you try to correct them, they'll take it wrong. They'll resent you. They'll say, I hate you, Mommy. Why did you make me sit in the corner? Whatever it is, and you tell them to sit in the corner to think about what they have done that's wrong. You think they're thinking about what they did is wrong? No way. They're thinking about, why did Mommy do this to me? I hate Mommy, Daddy's too, nobody else has as terrible parents as I have. And they're thinking of all manner of evil against you. Don't let their minds just wander on those kinds of things, So my suggestion, not that timeout is bad, there is a reason for timeout, and that's when a child is habitually doing something that you don't want him to do. This is a kid who's constantly, every time anybody comes close, any kid his age, he's punching him, or he's biting him, or another one, climbing on the counter constantly, every time you turn around, this kid is climbing on the counter. You've said, don't, so many times that it's, why is this kid doing this? Well, there is a time for timeout, and that's a retraining behavior modification technique. You take the one behavior that you don't want, and every time he does that behavior, you say, timeout for hitting, and take him, if it's hitting, and take him to the timeout room. But you don't just leave him alone, but you have done something. Now, this is not quick changing of behavior. This is retraining, okay? So you may have to do it again and again because you're not going to get angry. All you're going to say is timeout for whatever the misbehavior was. And if you do it enough and consistently enough, you cannot go to the bathroom while you're doing this kind of thing, you know. You cannot go shopping in the middle of this kind of thing. You've got to be there. You've got to immediately, as soon as he starts to do it, time out for. So he doesn't get rewarded that he's already standing on the table saying, ha, 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 I'm up here, okay? You got to catch him in the act of going there. Time out, and if you do it consistently enough, you will train him without spanking, without harsh words. You will train him not to do what he is doing. It works, but it's a totally involved method. What I suggest that along with this for habitual behavior, that you use a timeout for problem solving. Because most of the time, what we get is a child, you know, doesn't pick up his clothes, or a child hits his brother, you know, once a week or something, you know, but we are so frustrated. Or a child does something else. And if we're doing time out for this, time out for that, time out for this, time out for that, for all different things, the kid becomes resentful that he's having to grow up in the timeout room. And it doesn't learn anything but that he hates you. So it's time out for problem solving. And let him go to a pleasant place and say, okay, now we're going to figure out how another way to get what you want without the behavior that mommy, you know, there are 3 things you cannot do in this house. You may not hurt yourself. These are the 3 commandments of child raising, basically. You may not hurt yourself. You may not hurt others. And you may not hurt things. Okay? Yeah, it's really hard because, you know, even if a kid is sassing you, you may not hurt mommy, and that hurts mommy's feelings. And that's one of the 3 commandments. I'm sorry, you may not hurt others. So you can pull it down to those 3 things, and then you can problem solve. What else could you do? You know, could you come up to mommy and say, Mommy, I really need to talk to you because my love cup is empty, and I think yours is too, or whatever it is. But you go to what I call a problem-solving place, the bedroom, some quiet place where the child can think about how can I solve the problem. And as soon as you have an idea, come tell me about it. Or if you want me, I'll come and sit beside you, and maybe we can talk about it together and figure out a way to get out of this problem that we're in. So we want to teach our children that they are able to solve their own problems without having to have mom solve them or dad solve them or the teacher solve them, that they can figure out ways to cope. And once they do this, folks, they feel so good about themselves that they have this power. But we have to give them little ideas about how to solve the problem. So basically, I want to move on. If there are no more questions about the importance of filling a person up before you even correct them, because once they're filled up, they can take your correction a whole lot more. And because you're filling them, you're not so angry either. You know, you're more controlled, and you can think more clearly about what you want to say to your kids instead of just reacting and in your reaction, causing them to react, and then you get the parent-child conflict, which, listen, you folks, you don't need it at 1 year of age or 2 years of age with your kids. You'll get it at 16 years of age, enough, just keep as much of the conflict away as possible, because once conflict comes into the situation, once an adversarial situation happens, then it's more likely to end up in a fight. So if you can figure out how to stop it, how to get on the same side, well, I'm going to give you a lot of ideas this afternoon. But basically, the love cup is the first. Okay, are you ready to go on for the second reason why children misbehave? It's because they want to make their own decisions. They want to win. They want power. They want control. And this is why we talked about the string. When you see a child start to resist, you know you're pushing the string too much in the direction you want them to go. Now, if you weren't here this morning, you forgot, you don't know what I'm talking about. But basically, we talked about children are like strings. The more you push them in the direction you want them to go, the more they tend to resist. So you have to figure out how to persuade them, how to encourage them, how to motivate them, rather than just pushing them in the direction you want them to go. Now, we know when there are young children, especially, they feel much more secure. In fact, I should say all children do. They feel much more secure when they know what the boundaries are, when they know what the limits are, and when you are strong enough to keep the limits. That's extremely important. So by all this love cup stuff, I'm not talking about letting go of your limits. Your limits need to be clear, they need to be meaningful, and they need to make sure that the children are not testing you by putting their little hairy toes over the line and saying, ha, 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 what can you do about it, okay? So, limits are important. How do you teach children the limits and yet still keep them from getting into a conflict with you? You do that by having significant consequences. But the consequences do not have to be painful. They just have to be meaningful. All right? So much of the time we think that a crime, a misbehavior of a kid, needs to be punished. But if you look up the word punished in the dictionary, you'll think twice about whether that's really what you want to do to children. It's an eye for an eye. It's getting back at them. It is making it painful to them. Punishment basically is like going to prison, and or getting the life sentence or something like that, for something that you have done. What I like to say is consequences are what you want to give to children. And it needs to be a consequence that can teach them what you want to teach them. Now, when children are very small, the consequences need to be, let me just give you some examples. I can do it better. Children want to make decisions. God created us with the need to make decisions. That's one of the things about being human that's different from the animal world. We have a cerebral cortex that is made for making decisions. It's your cerebral cortex, your frontal lobe, where the Holy Spirit speaks to you. It's where you put the 10 Commandments in and know whether you're doing right or wrong. It's where your conscience is clear and you can understand what you should do, okay? But young children can't make decisions as well because they haven't been taught. So in terms of control, parents have a lot more control rather than the child. If this were like a box and we would put a diagonal line right through the box. At birth, for the first 2 or 3 years, we see a lot of other control, mother control, father control with our children. But as they learn, as we educate their cerebral cortex in terms of you may not hurt others, you may not hurt things, you may not hurt yourself, those kinds of lessons that we teach children, they can begin to make more and more and more and more and more of their decisions. So hopefully by the time they're 16 years of age, they can make all of their own decisions, unless it's in an area that they do not have experience in. And then you will step in and say, wait a minute, I've got an idea here. You know, the boundary is this. and that's it. Mom's not going to move. Mom's in charge, you know. But by about 16, 17, 18, our kids, if we have done this discipline thing correctly and taught them correctly, they will not be in rebellion. You cannot trust a child in rebellion. You cannot give him the reins of control, because he will do it to get back at you, to get back at society, to get back at the police force or whatever it is, you know, because he's in rebellion. But if a child is not in rebellion, about 16, 17, 18, there's a reason why we say you're an adult at about 18 years of age. The Jewish population said at 12 years of age, you're basically an adult. And so between 12 and that's when the bar mitzvah is, at 12 years of age, right? And, okay, so between 12 and 16, 18 years of age, children should be making most of their own decisions because their conscience has been well educated, all right? Let me skip to a creative way that a family that had 16-year-old kids dealt with their children. They learned that children will make good decisions if you go through 3 things, a process of 3 things. They should be able to make their own decision. Now, in order to remember this, you're going to have to write down this acronym, S-E-A. You got it? S is at the top, and then I'll give you something that it stands for. E comes next, and A is at the bottom, okay? Now, children should be able to make their own decisions if they are able to, the S, seek information, all right? Now, if they think they know it all and won't listen to anybody's counsel, and they should not be making the decision, whether they're 16 or whether they're 40, okay? They are not good decision makers, okay? So you need to seek information, number 1. Then, if they're able to do that and also able to do the second thing, S-E is the next one. E stands for evaluate the alternatives. So they need to be able to say, well, what about this or what about this? But if they are biased and they only want to do this, they should not be making a decision because it will not be a good decision. They have bias in there. They have not looked carefully at what all the alternatives are in terms of the consequences, in terms of what it would do to them, etc. So you do not let them make the decision. The third thing that needs to fall in here, like, what is it, slot machine? Boom, boom, boom. Get the 3 cherries or whatever it is, you know? Okay, the third cherry is S-E-A. You got it? Accept the consequences. Are they able to accept the consequences? And if the consequence would be too hurtful to them, too painful, for example, the consequences they could get, killed in an accident because they don't know how to drive very well, or whatever it is, or they could get hurt by somebody else, or, if the consequence is too painful, you make the decision. Okay? Now, this mother wanted to have a more democratic rule in the house. She knew this system, and she felt that her children could make good decisions. So she and her husband got together, and they told the children, then they were something like, I don't know, 15, 17, 19, right in that age. I mean, just under 20. She told the kids that we're now going to have a democratic system with the majority rules. 3 children, 2 adults. We'll bring up the situations, we'll vote on it, and the majority will rule. Now that's taking your life in your hands as a parent if there are only 2 of you and there are 3 kids. But Mom knew that if she brought it up, and basically Mom wanted a curfew time for the kids so that they would come in at a certain time. She wanted to set up a situation so they knew what to do when they were away from home, and maybe wouldn't make it back on time. They would call, they would report, and so she went to seek information and how important a curfew was, etc. She looked at the alternatives and brought them out to the family and the consequences, what might happen if they wouldn't keep the curfew time, etc. And then finally they took the vote. And the vote came out, whether or not they wanted a curfew, 3-2. 3 teenagers who didn't want the cure for you, and 2 parents who did. And Mom said, I've had it. Enough of this democratic stuff. Back to the boundaries, I'm going to make the decisions about what the limits are in this family, and we will have a curfew time. Anyway, she was spouting off to her husband, this does not work. And he said, sweetheart, we just have a little creative on this. They really just heard the words, but they have never experienced why a curfew is so important. So without the children knowing, sometimes education takes time to figure out the scenario that will educate the children. It may not be instantaneous. And so Mom and Dad got together, and they decided that Mom was going to leave the next afternoon before the kids got home from school. She was going to pack her overnight bag and stay over at her friend's house all night. She was not going to tell anybody where she was and what time she would be back, and because there was no curfew, da-da-da-da-da. Okay. Kids came home. Supper time came. Where's Mom? She's always home for supper. I'm getting hungry. Well, said Dad, maybe you kids just better start fixing something. I'm getting hungry too. And because, your mom, anyway, she could take care of herself. I'm sure she's just fine. Bedtime came. Now the kids were really desperate. Where is Mom? Dad, aren't you worried? I mean, Kmart's even closed, and Mom's not home. And, or Costco is closed. I don't know what's in this area. But, Mom's not home. Aren't you worried? Well, Dad said, I know your mom is old enough to take care of herself. I'm sure she's making a good decision wherever she is. Well, the kids could not believe Dad's reaction. They went to bed worried. Let me tell you, they were worried. They got up early the next morning, ran in, knocked on their parents' door, went in, and found out that Mom hadn't been home all night. Dad, what do you mean? Mom hasn't been home all night? Dad, call the missing persons. Something terrible has happened to Mom. Oh, said Dad, I'm sure she's fine. They could not believe their father's reaction. A few minutes later, they heard the back door open, and there was Mom with her suitcase. Mom, where have you been? Why, she said. I thought we voted that we didn't have to tell people where we were going. But Mom, why didn't you come home last night? Well, she said, I thought we voted. There wasn't going to be any curfew. There was no reason to come home. I was having a good time with my girlfriend. Why should I come home? You all were in bed. But Mom, you're a mother. And suddenly it hit them what they had voted. And immediately they went back to the conference table, and the kids said, we're going to take another vote, whether or not we're going to have a curfew. what time people have to be home, what time mother has to be home, and we have to tell where we're going, who we're going with, and what time we'll be home. They learned a valuable lesson, but it took creative parents to give them the information, the experience that taught them why a curfew was important. And many times our children look at what we say and don't really understand why we have said it. So this is an example of what you can do to help your children. Well, this is at the end spectrum, and some of you, if you do have 16-year-olds, I want to give you another illustration of a 16-year-old in terms of a consequence that you can give to help him make, or her, make a good decision. The more pre-teaching you can do before a situation happens, the better. If there's a pit, a sinkhole in the middle of the road, and your teenager is going to be driving down that road, don't you think you ought to warn him? If there's no yellow bands, there's no barricades up, there's a pit in the road, I think you ought to warn them. I think there ought to be consequences so they know that you mean what you say. But you don't always have to come up with all the consequences. They can. And many times their consequences will be much more difficult or hard to accept than if you would have given them a consequence. So here's the story. It actually happened down at Laguna Beach. This dad was the guard on one of the gated communities, and we went into this community, and the guard said, Dr. K, what are you doing this summer? Because I usually would go down for a month or so and write during that time. And I said, I'm writing a book called Easy Obedience. And he said, do I have an illustration to tell you about? And he said, I always told all my kids before they got their driver's license, I'd sit them down, my wife and I, and we would go over what the rules were. And we would get, the curfew thing would come in. And one of the things that this kid wanted to do is he didn't want to have to come right home every day. He wanted to have a little bit of slack so that he could take his friends home if he wanted to and maybe get a soda in town. So Mom and Dad said, okay, that's okay. But I'll tell you what, we don't want you driving outside the city limits. We don't want you to drive all around Southern California, in other words. We want you to know that if you just bring somebody home or stop by for a few minutes to get something, that's okay. So, but if you drive outside the city limits, you jolly well better ask. And what do you think the consequence should be if you break any of these? And they had come up with a number of rules that he needed to follow. What do you think the consequence should be? And the kid said, well, I think I should lose my driving privileges for 30 days. A consequence, folks, to be really meaningful, needs to fit the crime. So if the kid spills the milk, the consequence, he picks it up. He cleans up the mess. If he breaks the window, he picks up the glass, pays out of his allowance to get the window fixed. It needs to fit the crime, okay? So the consequence he came up with is, I think I should lose my driving privileges for 30 days. Okay, said Mom and Dad, that seems reasonable to us. And the kid began driving back and forth to school. One day, Dad was in the next town over, and he heard this car with loud music coming out of it, with kids hanging out the windows, obviously not in seatbelts. The car was packed, and they were cruising the main street of the next town. Dad took one look. It was obviously his son's car, and his son was driving, but the kid didn't see him. So Dad went home, When the kid came home, Dad got in, drove the car into the garage, jacked the car up, took off all four wheels, okay, and rolled the wheels back to behind the garage where there was a telephone pole, put a great big chain through the wheels, and padlocked those wheels to the telephone pole. Kid came in. Dad, what happened to the car? Oh, Dad said, let's see, what did we decide would happen if you left the city limits without asking permission? Oh, Dad, did you see me today? Yep, I sure did. And asked your mom, you never asked, you didn't ask me. So what did we decide? What did you come up with to decide the consequence should be? And the kid said, well, I'd lose my driving privileges for 30 days. Oh, yes, said Dad. That's why the wheels are padlocked to the telephone pole. But I'll tell you what, in 30 days, I'll give you the key and you can put them back on the car. Let's just go to the calendar and let's count out the days, and I'll mark the day that I'll give you the key to the padlock. They started going down the calendar. And about halfway through the 30 days, it came to the kid. But Dad, the prom is in 3 weeks. Oh, don't worry about that, said his dad. I'll be very happy to take you and your date to the prom. I tell you, if you can come up with a good consequence, especially one that your kid came up with or helped come up with, it's a lot easier for that kid to swallow. It's a lot easier for that kid to accept. And he will learn something from that experience, that if you came up with a consequence, he would say, that's not fair. You're mean to me. Nobody else treats their kids like that, or whatever else, okay? So, do you have an idea about this thing called, let me give you a couple other experiences of consequences that aren't the typical. Mom told her 5-year-old, you need to clean your room. Now, most kids think they have about 16 years to clean their room, so you need to give them some limits. I want the room cleaned in 1 hour. Do you understand what that means? That is in 60 minutes. And I want you to set the alarm for 60 minutes, and when it rings, the room must be clean. But this means the blocks are to be put on that shelf. Do you understand? Tell me where the blocks go. So he's involved, in all these things. And she gave him 1 or 2 things, and then she knew that if he didn't get it done, she would have to come up with a really bad consequence. So she told him, and if you do not get it done in 60 minutes, 1 hour, you will suffer the worst consequence of your life. She hadn't come up with anything yet, but she knew she had set it up right so that he would obviously do what she asked him to do. The problem was, at about 59 minutes into the hour, she walked by and he hadn't even started. So when the alarm rang, she prayed for some kind of creativity, and she walked in to that room, and she said, the alarm just rang. What did I say was going to happen if the room was not cleaned and the alarm rang? And the kid said, well, that there would be a horrible consequence. Yes, she said. And she was still praying, Lord, help me to come up with something. Please help me to come up with something. Because she didn't want to hit him. She didn't want, those things hadn't really worked, okay? And so suddenly it hit her head. She said, okay, the horrible, terrible consequence is I'm leaving for the ice cream shop, 31 flavors, and you're staying home with Daddy. Goodbye. He could not believe that his mother was going to get ice cream without him. And she left, And believe it or not, she bought herself a quadruple decker ice cream cone. She wanted to make sure there was plenty of ice cream after she bought that thing to get home, to sit in front of this kid and eat the whole thing. You know, the next time that she said, your room needs to be cleaned. You have an hour to clean it. I want the blocks put on the shelf and the bed made. Do you understand what you need to do? It took him about 4 or 5 minutes to get the room clean. And then, now what do? Do you want to be tied to the 31 flavors as rewards for your life? No way, but let me tell you, if it only takes one ice cream cone to teach the kid the lesson, I don't believe in rewarding children with ice cream, with any kind of sweets, candy, those kinds of things. It's too easy for a person to get into a habit of rewarding themselves when they feel bad with these kinds of things and getting into some behaviors that really aren't good. So it's not a good idea. But let me tell you, the lesson of obedience is so fundamentally important to this whole kid's life that if you can teach it with one ice cream cone, do it. Just don't tell me about it, okay? And that's what this mother did. The next time that it happened, she said, you want to go out for a 31 flavor? Yeah, Mom, I do. But she only did it that one time. Because children need to learn that when you ask, they respond. And it's only with the relationship that you have built together that makes it happen. Okay? Otherwise, they will be in rebellion. Does that make sense? Now, folks, it's about 10 minutes after 6. We can either take a 5-minute break, but I'm afraid I'm going to lose some of you, or I can go on to the number 3 and number 4 thing about why children misbehave, and we'll plan to be over just a little after 7. How does that sound? Do you want to stand up? Why don't you stand up right in place? Take a deep breath. Rub the person's back beside you if you have anybody there, or at least move your shoulders around. Let's do some jogging in place. Breathe deeply, and I'll keep telling you stories as you move around. Yeah, and I'll try to, is that okay to try to keep them for another hour? You think I can? I don't know. It's been a long day, folks, but let's try, okay? Because I'd really love to give you all 4 reasons why children misbehave, all right? I wanted, okay, let's go to it, says this pastor. He has people to visit, things to do. Okay. I'd like to move on to the number 3rd reason why children misbehave. That's when they don't feel anybody loves them. They've gone through that, and they feel nobody's giving them positive attention. They've gone through stage number 2, where they don't feel they can make decisions, and their folks are forcing them and pushing them. And on to stage 3. This is the child who's in rebellion. This is the child who wants his own way, and he has anger and frustration and fear and jealousy and all those negative emotions running around inside of him. When you see a child misbehaving and immediately you realize that it's caused by negative emotions, you need to immediately think of the iceberg, all right? The iceberg. Because an iceberg that you see in the ocean, the iceberg that you see is only a small piece of the iceberg. I forgot to bring my picture of an iceberg along, but if you see the bottom of the iceberg, it is maybe 3/4 of the iceberg is underneath the water. You know, just a little tip of it is floating at the top. And that's exactly what you see with children's behavior. The behavior that you see is like the emotional behavior that you see is like the tip of the iceberg. So, if we would like to get rid of the iceberg, our first inclination is to chip away at the tip of the iceberg. But if you know iceberg psychology, if you chip away a piece of the top of the iceberg, what happens to the iceberg? Something else comes up out of the water. And let me tell you, with children, the secondary behavior is worse than the first. Because now it becomes revengeful to get back at you. Very often, the tip of the iceberg is overt behavior. You can see it. You didn't like it. The kid is acting out. He's having a meltdown, whatever you call it. The tip of the iceberg. But to try to just deal with that is not going to work. Something else is going to come out of the water, and chances are that will be worse than the first. Let me give you an illustration. A mom called me when I was still at Loma Linda University, but I was a columnist for the San Bernardino Sun. And so I didn't publish my telephone number. And I don't know how she got it, but I lifted up the receiver, and this mother kind of screamed at me, "Dr. K, don't hang up. I'm going to kill my kid." Well, I didn't hang up. I said, "Hey, what has your child done?" And she said, "My 3-year-old has just walked around my brand new grand piano with a metal fingernail file and has put a mark all the way around my brand new expensive grand piano." I said, "I understand why you feel like you're going to kill your kid, but what else has she done?" Because usually these behaviors are not in isolation. When a child is in rebellion, you do not just suddenly get one behavior. You see it coming. You see it coming. And folks, that should, most of the time, that should tell you, wow, my kid is in rebellion. I need help. I need someone to give me a clue about what's going on. Because many times you are too close to the situation to realize they need someone else to talk to. They need someone to give you an idea about what to do. Anyway, but when this happened, well, this woman said, "Oh, yeah, that's not the only thing this little girl has done." The other day, I pushed out the bed from the guest room that was against the curtain, and I noticed that she has cut off the bottom of the curtain. And she said, "But that's not all either." She said, she was toilet trained a year ago. But recently, since the baby was born, she has started urinating behind the plants in the living room. And I can't stop her. I can't catch her. And the whole living room is stinking. And I don't know what to do. Okay? But it's not when you're going through it. I mean, it's like, what do I do? This 3-year-old is driving me out of my mind. And the only thing you can think of is getting back at this child, making things so bad for her, so, spanking so hard or whatever, that you're going to just chip away at the top of the iceberg to get rid of it. Well, anytime you see behavior like this, what you immediately need to think about, what you're seeing is just the tip of the problem. What's driving the behavior is all the negative emotions underneath. And unless you get to those negative emotions and deal with them and diffuse those negative emotions, you're just going to get more and more of this kind of rebellious behavior. So I'm going to teach you now how to deal with this kind of behavior. And the way I'm going to do it is I need a volunteer. I need a volunteer who can really, really get angry at me. She can't. Come on, you've been reacting. Come on, I love this. I preach to this girl. She's lovely. I tell you, isn't it great when somebody, yes, and yes, and yoo-hoo, you're a great person to preach to because you know how to turn us speakers on. Okay, yeah, you help the preacher out. Okay, what is your name? Denique. Okay, Denique, you're my 11-year-old child. You can do that. Okay, now we haven't planned this. You didn't know I was going to do this, even though I picked you during the sermon. So I bet Denique, if she's there, I bet. All right, okay. So Denique, this is your school book. Now, it's a good hymnal, so don't be careful with it, So anyway, but this is your school book. Okay, now, we have not gone through this. She has no idea what I'm going to do. But this is the scenario. Denique has just been away all day long at school. She's 11 years old. Now think about that. 11 years old. Kids at 11 years old, they generally react to the situation. They're still fairly immature. They're not yet teenagers who can hopefully think through things, but whatever, And something terrible has happened at school. And she's coming home now. I'm her mother, all right? Her loving mother. And I'm going to treat her like mothers most often do, okay? A typical mom. Denique is going to come in. She's going to scream at me, "I hate my teacher." You got it? You think you can do that? Okay, all right. And then she's going to throw down her book on the someplace, okay, gently. She's going to throw down her book. And then, Denique, you're going to turn around and you're going to just slam the door as hard as you can. You are really, really angry, okay? And notice what I say as I start to chip away at the tip of the iceberg. Typical mom behavior. Notice how she reacts. Typical 11-year-old behavior. Now, I'm not telling her how to react. I want you to be a typical 11-year-old. And let's see how far we get, okay? You got it? I hate my teacher, down with the book, slam the door, and I'm going to react, okay? Typical mom. You got it? All right, here we go. I don't think she'll need it. I'm going to react. Okay. I'm going to just, okay. No, I promise I will not get out the razor strap or whatever. Okay. Denique, come here this minute. Don't you ever say again, "I hate my teacher." I've trained you better than that. Okay, what are you going to say? No. You're supposed to be a typical 11-year-old. Okay. So, what would you say if your mom said that to you? Denique, don't act that way. Don't you say those words. Don't tell me that you're angry and acting totally out of control. You cannot say those words about your teacher. And pick up that book. I will not have you throwing books on the floor. Come on, what should she do? Tell her what should she do. Scream back at me. Yeah. You wouldn't do that. Okay, I'm not going to kill. Okay, come on. I don't care what she did. She is your teacher, and you need to be respectful to her. You cannot say those words, and don't you ever slam that door again. Now, don't think you're going to get out of it by crying either. I want you to go back, shut the door correctly. Don't tell me that you're not going to do that. I asked you to do that. Absolutely. Okay, how am I doing, folks? Come on. Okay, you can see the impasse, all right? You can see, what? What I was doing is I was chipping away at the tip of the iceberg. That behavior that I saw that I didn't like. You think you're off the hook? No, we're going to do this again. Yeah, we're going to do this again. Okay, because I want to teach you a different technique. Now, the first time, what did I do, Danique? I picked up everything I didn't like. I picked up, she was saying, I hate my teacher. I picked up, she threw the book, and I tried to get her on the door. I was chipping away at the pieces of the iceberg and making her more and more angry. If she hadn't had a Jamaican mom that would have kicked out her teeth, you probably would have seen a little bit more of this, okay? So, and if I would have let it go again on for much longer, she probably would have picked up the book and thrown it at me because she was so angry at me. Why? We were on two sides of the fence. She was defending her territory, and I was defending mine. Okay? Now, listen to my words, and you have permission to be a bad kid. Okay, but listen to my words and watch what happens to Danique's behavior, okay, as she does the same thing again. All right, the very, very same thing. Listen carefully and see the difference it makes. But she doesn't know what I'm going to do. Okay. Okay, it doesn't matter. Danique, you feel angry. You feel angry. Something terrible must have happened at school. And you're just so angry you feel like slamming the door. Yeah. Yeah, and it hurts you when you don't think people understand you, and you just feel like throwing books and screaming. Yeah, and it's really tough, isn't it, when you really, really are angry and think that you're being taken advantage of, especially by a teacher. Yeah, honey, I know it's really, really tough at this point. Now, how do you think I'm doing? Yeah, it's hard to keep angry. Yeah, okay, she did a great job, folks. Yes, thank you. Now, what did I say the second time that kind of took the win? Now, she was good. She tried to keep angry as long as possible, but I kept trying to listen to what was underneath the surface. All of those negative emotions, tried to do some active listening. Wow, you really feel angry because, it's tough when your teacher does something to you that you don't understand, those kinds of words. What was I doing? I was diffusing the emotion. I was listening to the emotion. And I was on the same side of the fence as Danique. So there was no reason for her to continue to getting angry at me. If we would have kept it up, I could have gotten Danique diffused enough that I could have said to her, honey, how do you think you're going to solve the problem when you go back to school tomorrow? And because she knows I'm understanding her, she will probably say, well, Mom, what do you think I ought to do? And we can sit down, go through, well, we could do this, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. You kind of brainstorm. And then she said, well, Danique, what do you think would work out of all these things we've mentioned? What's the best thing that you can think of that you'd like to do? And she said, well, Mom, I think I'll try this one. And, okay, honey, let me know when you come back from school tomorrow how it goes, and I'll be praying for you, because it's not always easy to go back into a situation where you feel like a nobody, that somebody's taken advantage of you, that you've been accused of something wrong that you didn't do, or whatever the situation might have been. So, what did I say that was different the second time that I didn't do the first time? What did I say? Did you catch it? I validated her feelings. I said, oh, you feel angry. You can do it by saying, wow, you're really angry. Oh, honey, I can tell something terrible has happened. I can just see how angry it has made you. And, oh, wow. I mean, you don't have to just be like a robot. And every time a kid shows a little emotion, oh, you feel angry. Oh, you feel jealous. Oh, they'll say, Mom, get off that kick that you learned from that class, You got to be real, folks. But basically, you listen. And you don't even have to speak English. You can go, oh, wow. Oh, honey, tell me more. Ooh, ah, and pull those emotions out. Because you can't be a good problem solver when there's too much emotion going on in a person's life. Does that make sense? All right. So how do you deal with this misbehavior? Number one, you listen. But what if you're the one that's angry? What if you've been done wrong as a parent? What if your kid's behavior is driving you to distraction? My daughter has left the house again with the curling iron on, and all her hair paraphernalia is all over the bathroom, and the wet towel is in the middle of the bathroom again. Wait till she gets home. She's going to get it. She's going to be grounded for the next 2 weeks. I have told her. Am I making sense? I mean, you've got the feelings too. So you have to learn how to diffuse yourself. Okay? And the way you do this is with an I feel message. So you say to Danique, who has just left the bathroom a mess when she comes home, Danique, I feel angry every time I see that the bathroom is left in a mess. Now, you really, to be really, really, really good at this, need to learn to never say you in these statements, okay? You need to learn to say, I feel because the bathroom's a mess, rather than, I feel angry because you left the bathroom a mess again. Yep, that'll kill it right there, because that's an accusatory statement, okay? I feel angry. I feel angry when the bathroom is left a mess because I want the house clean in case visitors come. Whatever it is, but you get it out. And then Danique can come back and she can say something like, well, I never have time to clean it up, and besides, I'm just going to use it tomorrow morning anyway. Why should it matter to you? Honey, I need to have the bathroom clean for my own peace of mind before you leave. I feel. Get those I statements out. And if I have not caused a conflict with Danique, so she doesn't go into rebellion and says, I don't care how you feel, then chances are she will say, whether she has a good Jamaican mom or not, chances are she will say, well, Mom, what do you think we should do? I never have time to clean it up. And Mom can say, honey, would it help if I got you up 10 minutes earlier? Or reminded you 5 minutes before you have to go, or cut breakfast 5 minutes shorter? Would it help you out if I just helped you clean it up every morning so that by the time you go out to the school bus or whatever it is, the room is clean? And I can feel good, and you can feel good, and I can give you a hug. Whatever it takes, let's solve this problem, because we are capable of solving this problem. So it doesn't make me mad, and I don't make you mad, okay? Do you understand that? So it's a two-way street, folks. But you cannot be a good parent if you've got too much anger boiling up in your life, and your kid cannot be a decent kid if he's got too much anger and negativity and emotions rolling around in him, okay? A good book to hold on to this is the book that I brought along called Belonging. I wrote this book with Ron and Nancy Rocky, and they are psychologists, and they understand more than, they are really good at understanding why people do what they do. And getting to the past, which is the fuse that ignites in the present. And understanding why certain things just ignite you to anger. So that's the book Belonging, okay? Now, I'd like to move on to the final thing, why children misbehave. And then maybe we could have a few questions, okay? The fourth reason why children misbehave is because they feel bad about themselves. They have no sense of value. They do not feel worthwhile. And this is dangerous because kids who really feel bad about themselves will do anything. Some of you noticed that about 10 days ago, a 11th grader at Memphis Junior Academy, the Adventist school there in Memphis, killed the principal. And I just flew through Memphis yesterday and talked to the cart guy that drove me from, A concourse all the way over to B 49 or whatever it was. It was a long way. And I asked him some questions about it because not everything came through on my computer where I get my news from. And so I asked him how the Memphis was feeling about this. And he said the very sad thing is that this 11th grader didn't really understand how much this teacher loved him and was going out of her way to help him. And my gut feeling is he felt so bad about himself, about who he was, about the situation, that he just took the gun and filled her with enough bullets to kill her. Isn't that sad? We need to make sure our children feel good about themselves. Not that they're going to become, blow up their children at school or their teacher or something about that. But that's the end point. These students, these young people, these people that shoot presidents very often feel so bad about themselves that whatever punishment they get for the crime that they are going to commit, it doesn't matter. Just kill me. I'm a nobody, okay? So I believe, actually, that even though this is the number 4 reason why children misbehave, I really believe that this is the number 1 reason that we need to start working on to help our children from the very beginning feel valuable, that they are worth something, that they are precious, that they are God's gift to us. And the way that we're going to understand this is I brought along my jawbreaker. Now, I don't know if you have ever eaten a jawbreaker. This is a real jawbreaker. Now, it's a little bigger than what you can stick in your mouth. This you have to lick a long time to get it down. But most of them are about the size of what, a nickel or maybe a dime. They're small. But we eat jawbreakers different than we eat any other kind of candy. All right? We eat jawbreakers by putting them in our mouths and we suck on them for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes, and then what do? We take it out of our mouth, and we look at it. Now, why do we look at it? We don't do that with a chocolate cherry or with a mint or anything else. Why do we look at the Jawbreaker? Because it changes colors. There are many, many different layers, colorful layers in a Jawbreaker. I don't know if you can see this or not, or if the other piece is better, but yeah, this maybe is a little bit better for you to see the different colors in the middle of a Jawbreaker. Now, your children's self-concept is very much like a Jawbreaker. And if we know what goes in to making up a self-concept, then we know as parents what to do to start building our kids' sense of worthiness, that they are God's gift to us, that they are special. And so very quickly as we close, I'm going to tell you about these 4 things, actually 5 things, that make up a child's self-concept, that make up your self-concept. Who you are right now is basically a product of how you were treated in 4 different ways, with the 5th being, well, I'm going to hold that to the end, okay? Number 1, the very middle of the Jawbreaker, the very core of your self-concept is how you feel about how you look. It's your self-image. And I believe kids need to grow up feeling that they're perfect in terms of how they look in their parents' eyes. Basically, this is the thing you can do least about. You look the way you look because your parents looked the way they looked. And your grandma and grandpa looked the way they looked. So it's something you can't do very much about. On Schuler's program a number of years ago, the Hour of Power, I heard him interview a little dwarf. The man was something like 54 years of age, and usually dwarfs do not live that long. And his brother, both of them had done very, very well in the business world, his brother had just died. So Schuler was interviewing him. And Schuler asked the question, did your mother, who was regular size, and your dad, who was regular size, did they do anything during your childhood, growing up as little midgets, little dwarfs, did they do anything to help you feel better about who you were? And the little guy just smiled, and he said, oh, yes, my mother would always say that my brother and I were 2 shiny dimes in a world full of nickels. And that's what all of our kids need to know, that they are absolutely, in your vision, the most good-looking kids in the whole world, and feel special about how they look, because others will take off on this. This is one of the devil's worst things that he will do to destroy a person's sense of who they are and their value. The magazines all do it. Television commercials do it. If you do not smell right, if you do not have your hair done right, with the right kind of shampoo or the right kind of conditioner, or if you do not wear the right kind of makeup to make yourself look, or the right kind of dresses, or the right kind of, I don't know, briefs, whatever, you are not there in terms of your self-image is not as good as it could be. It's crazy what the devil does. Now, get this. You treat your children differently, or you will be tempted to treat your children differently because of how they look. Statistics show that parents who have what are judged to be good-looking kids treat those children differently than children who are not judged to be good looking. Can you believe that? I couldn't until the day that I had Kari. Kimberly came along, 18 and a half hours of hard labor to push this kid out into the world. I was so glad to be delivered of all that pain that I would have taken anything. Folks, she was born with a great big knot on her head as she was trying to push out the wrong way with her forehead. That's not the way babies are supposed to. The back of their head is what molds to get out, to be born. And she was not coming that way. And so it was, I looked at that kid after 18 and a half hours of hard labor. I thought she was gorgeous. She was beautiful. And then, 15 and a half months later, with now my little 1.5-year-old running around with little blonde curls, and precious little girl, Kim, I had my second. But it didn't go quite the same as the first. When I first began to feel those pains, it was a week early, by the way, and Kim came right exactly on the day she was supposed to be born. So I was thinking I was, pretty regular, and a week early in the morning, all of a sudden I felt that labor pain, and I said, "Oh, Lord, please, just as quickly as possible. I gave 18 and a half hours last time, and I know statistically the second is supposed to be come in half the time. I will willingly go through 9 hours of labor, but please, Lord, no longer, just as quickly as possible." That was my prayer, okay? Got up, got in the shower. I don't know what happened. The water broke immediately. I had no the first stage of labor. I mean, it was over. I was now pushing that baby out. My muscles were working. I was frantic. I screamed at my husband, who was still sound asleep, "Honey, I'm having the baby." What baby? It was a week early. We wasn't quite ready for this, I got him out of bed. I said, "Call the emergency room. We've got to go quickly." And I knew we had to get all the way from Redlands, past Loma Linda, all the way to Kaiser, which was, it should have taken us 45 minutes from Redlands. Listen, folks, I think it took us half that time. He was flying to try to get to the hospital before the baby was born. And I was praying, "Lord, I've changed my mind. Not as soon as possible. Just let me get to the hospital." And as we drove into the hospital, the attendant ripped open the door and grabbed me out of the front seat and put me into a wheelchair. And I stood standing in the wheelchair. And he said, "Lady, sit down." And I said, "I can't sit down. The baby's being born." And he pushed me through the doors of the hospital. And a nurse caught the baby. I believe in answered prayer. And I also believe you should never pray for something you really don't want. And then I sat down. And I looked at this baby. I'd never noticed this with my first. But this baby had this white goop all over her. I mean, she wasn't born in the right place. There I was, still sitting down in the emergency waiting room, kind of, and with this baby. I think they must have pushed me off to the side and put a curtain around me. And I looked at this baby and said, "She doesn't look right." I said, "She has this straight black hair sticking all over with this goop on it. And she has black hair right down the middle of her back a little bit. And she's fat. She was 9 pounds, 1 ounce. I said, I can't believe such a fat baby. She was so fat that her little jaws were connected to her big tummy. I mean, she didn't have a neck. And her nose, she came so fast. Her nose was pushed up on her forehead. I'd never seen a baby in that condition before. And I looked at this child and I said, this is not mine. And then I followed the umbilical cord that was still attached. It's not funny. It is not funny. You know what? Yep, absolutely. But that's what the devil does to us. Now, as soon as I took this baby and I held this baby and I put her to my breast and she started eating, the motherly reaction was there. And she became more beautiful because I felt the connection, the love. But folks, for one frightening moment, I didn't. She came so quickly that I didn't have a chance to be bonded with this child. Now, if you want to take a look at an absolutely gorgeous woman who's now 38 years old, you look on the back of my book, The First 7 Years, and you'll see my Kari. She's absolutely gorgeous. Little. Anyway, but at that moment, because of looks and no bonding, I had the same reaction that statistics have found with so many others. The baby looked like my husband who did me wrong. The baby looked like the uncle who was no good. The baby looked like my great aunt who was whatever. And we so often treat our children the way they look. But once love comes in and you feel the bonds, it's different, folks. You don't have to go by what the devil puts in your mind at first. You can overcome that. And let me tell you, the curse that we call a curse, the pain that we go through at childbirth, for the first time in my life, I realized what a blessing. That because of sin, if we hadn't gone through, as mothers, the pain, would we have had the bonding? Would we have had the bonding? God always knows what's really good for us. And it's not so bad that men have to work a little harder either in this world, that there's a few more weeds, et cetera, you know. But basically, I just want to tell you how important self-image is. But because a child can't do much about it, we have to accept that and allow the child to know that they are perfect, however they look. And therefore, we need to learn to say to our kids, honey, I love your hair just the way it is, you know. In fact, it's pretty much like mommy's hair. Aren't you lucky? You know, and let them know how special they are because they look a certain way. And we all know that because of the way we look, we can contact people and witness to them different than somebody else might be able to because of our self-image. And God wants us to feel good about how we look because, for example, if you go to a party and you're dressed all wrong, what do you think about all night at the party? Oh, I should have worn something else. Oh, my goodness, everybody else is dressed this way. And, you're thinking about yourself. Is that who God wants you to think about all the time? No. He wants you to feel so comfortable about how you look that you can accept yourself and walk into a situation and help others feel good about how they look. Woo, I like your dress. Wow, does that hair do something for you? Man, I love those new glasses you got, you know. And that's what you need to do for your children as well as others. And you will build their sense of of who they are by accepting them just the way they are, okay? But that's only the first. The second layer is what I call self-esteem. This is how a person feels about themselves in relation to other people. So if I go up to, oh my goodness, what is your name again? Keisha. I love that. I'm going to use that in I'm helping Miss Brenda. Do you know who Miss Brenda is? She has Kids Time on 3ABN. She's writing a series of bedtime story books. and I'm basically her chief writer, editor, and we're always looking for unique names. And I told Keisha, well, I'm going to use that one. And anyway, then I forgot it. Goodness. Anyway, so if I walk up to Keisha, and Keisha says, "Oh, Kay, it's so good to see you. I haven't seen you since you did that seminar, in Los Angeles." And she gives me a great big hug, and we share, well, what's happening in your life now, and what your husband doing, and oh, so good to see you. I feel like $1,000,000 because I see myself in Keisha's mirror that I am an okay person. So I feel good about myself. A moment later, I can see someone else, and I can say, "Oh, hey, I need to talk to you. Wait a minute." As they start to drive away, they look around, see who I am, and keep driving. I am the same person who felt on top of the world when I saw myself in Keisha's mirror. And now when I see myself in the other person's mirror, I am at the bottom of the pit. I am a nobody. They didn't even want to wait around to talk to me. That's what self-esteem is all about. We see ourselves as we feel others see us. And the job of parents now is to make the home situation so filled with love that the kids always see in our mirror that they are special. So, when they go out from our home, we pump them up over the evening hours, over the breakfast hours. When they leave our home, they are on the top of the roller coaster, ready for their day. And you never know what pits you're going to hit during the day. But hopefully you've got enough psychological energy from your family that you can get through the pits and you can get back and get pumped up again to meet the next day. That's what a family is all about. Too many kids leave home at the bottom of the roller coaster, and they hit the pit, and they can't get out. And suicide has become the number 2 reason why kids, teenagers, are killing themselves. But folks, we don't know about the number 1 reason. How many of those accidents are really suicides? Maybe suicide is number 1 in our teenage population because they do not feel good about who they are. And in their world that they live in, they see they're no good, and they can't get through the pits in life. We need to be sharing, making sure the way we treat, what we say to our children pumps them up instead of deflates them. Okay? The number 3 reason why in terms of the layers of a self-worth, the number 3 thing is what I call self-confidence. Now, this is how you feel, or your children feel about themselves in relation to their environment, in relation to the different situations that they go into. Do they feel comfortable going into those new situations? And basically, what makes you most self-confident is developing your talents and your abilities and being given a chance to do many things to see where your little spark of genius is. We need to be talent scouts for our kids so that they feel they have skills and abilities to give to the world, to give to the church. We need to be allowing children to have prayer. We need to be making sure that our children are given opportunities for leadership within our church family so they build their sense of self-confidence and who they are. When I was a kid, I played the clarinet. And I took lessons on how to play this clarinet, but it still squeaked when it shouldn't have squeaked. And I never could remember all those different key combinations. And one day, I'll just tell you what happened in band, because I was very, very shy. And in band, in order to be number 1 chair or to move up in your section, you had to be challenged by somebody and you had to stand up and play a certain section that the band director chose, and then they judged whether you played it better or the other person played it better, and if they played it better, they took your seat, you know. Well, I was so shy that I would just say, oh, that's all right, just take my seat, I'll just scoot down. Well, I finally ended up playing, I think, like fourth clarinet in the school band, but all the good-looking boys were also in band, so I stayed in band, even though I was at the end of this huge clarinet section. One day, I was helping my mom clean out the attic. I found my dad's great big old E-flat tuba. Now, it's like a huge baritone, but it's not a sousaphone, but they don't even make them anymore. But anyway, we lugged that thing out of the attic, and I asked my dad, how do you play a scale? Well, it only had 3 valves, 3 things. I was used to a clarinet that had 165 different combinations. I don't know how many, but it was too many for me. And wow, it was so fun. You could lip it up and down, pa pa, pa pa, You didn't have to do anything. And he taught me how to do a scale, and I practiced all that vacation. When band started again after vacation, I lugged this thing off to band, and I became first tuba, first chair. I was the only tuba player in the band. But I had a skill that nobody else had. And sometimes we put our children in little boxes that everybody else is in. And they can't be number 1 in mathematics, and number 1 in art, and number 1 in soccer, and number 1 in the violin section, and number 1. It's just too much, and the competition pulls them down. Find something for your child that's unique, that God has gifted them. That's why I'm so glad this church is having your nominating committee built on spiritual gifts rather than just putting this person in that slot and that person in this slot. So you can grow your giftedness, and that's what we need to do with our children. We need to make sure that we're their talent scouts and give our children many, 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 many opportunities to grow their skills and abilities, because God can use every single one of them. Just a quick story on this, and then I'm done. Okay, almost done, okay? I just want to share that there was something that my daughter Kim wanted to do. She wanted to take modeling. And let me tell you, folks, I didn't want her to take modeling. It wasn't the career that I wanted her to go into. There's just so many dangers I felt in that career. But she, at 16 years of age, wanted to take modeling. So I said to Kim, all right, Kim, I don't think you're going to like it, honey, but if you have it in your heart that you'd like to take modeling, then you may take the course, but you may not quit after the first or second class. You have to go and finish the whole course. Well, she wanted to quit after the first or second class. She didn't want to do this. She knew it. But at the very end of the course, they put her, and those were the years when videos were just coming out, they put this 16-year-old kid in front of the camera and interviewed her and made her do an interview. A number of months later, made her finish the course, in other words. A number of months later, we were taking a roots trip to Poland, where my husband was born. And my husband said, the Polish relationship with the U.S. now is so bad. It's, we have imposed martial law on them, and economic sanctions and all these things, and it's so sad. And he said, if only somebody like a teenager, and that was when Samantha Smith had just gone to Russia and then was killed in an airplane accident. And he said, if only we had somebody like that go to Poland. And Kim said, well, I'll go to Poland and talk to the president if you want me to. Ta-da! And her daddy said, well, I think that's a great idea. Let's write a letter to General Jaruzelski, the president of Poland. It was communist at that time. And just see if there's somebody in his cabinet or in his office who would like to talk to you about being a teenage representative to help with Polish-American relationships. I could not believe what Daddy and Kim were planning. They wrote a letter. They gave it to me to mail. And as I put the stamp on to find out how much it needed to go all the way to Poland and put it into the mailbox, I prayed, Lord, let this letter get lost. But it didn't. President Jaruzelski got the letter. He said, I want to meet this girl. We were going to Poland on a roots trip, arrange the time when they're going to be here. I want to meet this girl. Folks, I couldn't believe it. I mean, what was I gonna wear? I mean, this was way out of my league, from the little orange grove in Redlands, California, to the White House of Poland. Well, she went, and they took 5 hours to get us ready to see the president. They grilled us about what we were going to say. They told us where we were going to sit. And as we went in, they took a picture of us. They told us we would go in, present our gift to the president, and stand there with him for the official photograph. Well, as the kids, they were actually leaving band tour early in London to be able to fly to Germany and then on to Poland with us. So the kids at band knew that Kim and her sister Kari, the whole family, was going to go in and see the president of Poland. Well, you folks probably have forgotten, but General Jaruzelski was a little general, and he looked always. And the last thing they said to Kim as she got on the plane to fly to Germany is, see if you can make the general laugh. Okay? Those are teenage comments. And so I had heard that, and as we were taking this picture, the president of Poland was standing right next to me, and then my husband had said, or I guess next to Kimberly, anyway, whatever. And somebody made some joke among all the photographers, and everybody was laughing. And I turned to look at the president to see if he was laughing, and they took a picture. Well, they had taken many pictures. But when they gave us, at the end of our time there, when they brought the official photograph, the man who presented it to us, who was the secretary of Poland, like two down, there's a vice president and a secretary, or whatever. Anyway, when he came to give us the pictures, he came with these words. General Jaruzelski chose this as your official photograph. And he said and Dr. Professor Kuzma, to my husband, Dr. Professor Kuzma, we hope, the president said, tell Dr. Professor Kuzma that I hope he is not jealous the way his wife is looking at me. That's the picture of me looking over at him. But anyway, there Kim sat. They said we'll be there for maybe 45 minutes talking to him. There's the president. There's my husband on one side, Kimberly on the other, and the rest of us around the table. Folks, we were there 2.5 hours, and I watched my 16-year-old daughter talk to the president of Poland back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, answering questions, asking questions, and I thought, praise God for that modeling class. God, if we can open the doors and tell our children that God can use every single talent you develop, He can use it for His glory. If you are dedicated to Him, if you hear His voice calling you, you can be an Esther for such a time as this. God can use you. Let's give them that sense of confidence. But there's the fourth one. That's self-respect. And that's basically doing what you know you ought to do. But that may be the hardest thing for our kids. That may be the hardest thing for us. I was at Kmart. Got a whole bunch of plants. Got a little package of 39-cent seeds. I got to my car, started putting them in the car, and I noticed the seeds were not in a sack. And I thought, oh, did they forget to charge me for those seeds? And I was late for an appointment, and I looked on my sales slip. The seeds were not there, and I stood in the parking lot with that 39-cent package of seeds with my kids watching, saying, I deserve these seeds. I missed that last blue light special. You know, I took something back. I didn't have my receipt, and they only gave me half back. I've already paid for these seeds. I have shopped at Kmart so much, I ought to be part owner in the store by now, you know. And then I thought, you know what? Others will treat me with disrespect. Try to lower who I am. Why am I going to do it to myself by not doing what I know I should do? I took those seeds back. Somebody in the back of the line said, I can't believe when they heard that, you know, they had forgotten to charge me for them and I needed to give them 39 cents. Somebody said, I cannot believe such honesty in this day and age. What did my children learn from that? Folks, I walked out of Kmart with a paid-for 39-cent package of seeds, feeling like I had just been given a $5,000 fur coat. I mean, I felt a glow. And our children can have that same feeling when they do what they know they ought to do. And we say, good for you. Yeah, I know that was so hard to apologize, but you did it. And I am so proud of you. And God is proud of you. And we build their sense of self-respect because they're choosing to do what they know they ought to do. But I want to end with the coating that goes over everything. And that is God's value of us. We cannot change it. To God, we might make mistakes. We might not look all that good. Our self-image might not be very high. Our feeling of self-esteem, because people may reject us and bully us, and we may feel down at times, and we may try to get up and play the piano and make a mistake in the middle of church, and we feel terrible about it, and there goes our self-confidence, and we may make some mistakes and cheat or do something wrong, and we feel bad like Peter did, you know, and the guilt runs over us, and yep, those times might come. But there's something that will never, ever, ever change if you can give this gift to your child. And that's the knowledge that God loves them no matter what. They are valuable. He died for them. He has a plan for them. Before they were born, He had a whole life plan for them. I mean, how valuable they are. And I would like to just encourage you to help your kids feel that they are more valuable than anybody else here in Los Angeles. And I'd like to close with the story. Maybe you've heard it. I know I've been saying I'm going to close. I've been doing it for half an hour. Isn't that awful? But I am going to close right now. Okay. With this story. But maybe, how many of you have seen the movie, the film Johnny Lingo? It's an old film. We used to show it a lot. Somebody here, do you remember Johnny Lingo? Okay, one hand. All right, good. So I'm telling it for the rest of you. And we can, those of us who have seen the film can enjoy the story one more time. The story is about a really shrewd trader. And he's handsome, and oh my goodness, you just look at him, and whoo, your heart, just leaps. And he's a really shrewd trader, and he's coming to the island to buy himself a wife. And all the villagers are saying, oh my, do you know he's planning to buy Mahana? Mahana, he's just such a shrewd trader, he knows he can get her for nothing because Mahana is worth nothing. I mean, she is ugly, she is shy, she has no friends, she wears ugly clothes. Her father even says she has straw in her head instead of brains. And he wants to buy Mahana because he knows he can get her for nothing. That's the kind of shrewd trader he is. And then the next scene, he's sitting next to or across from old Moki, Mahana's father. And Moki says, as they're trying to determine, bargaining now to see how much Mahana is worth, Moki says, I will take 3 cows for Mahana. Oh, the villagers start to laugh. 3 cows for Mahana. She is not worth anything. She's not even worth the 3 hoofs and a tail, let alone the rest of the cow. And Johnny stills the laughter. And he says, 3 cows is a lot to pay for a wife. But I will pay 8 cows for Mahana. 8 cows! Nobody in the village has ever heard of somebody paying 8 cows for a wife. And now word spreads, Johnny is so vain, he wants everybody to know that he has paid more cows for a wife than anybody else. The marriage ceremony takes place. Johnny and Mahana leave for an extended honeymoon. The next scene, months and months later, they're now back on the island in their little hut and with a thatched roof. And down from the store comes the storekeeper. A gift has come in that Johnny ordered for Mahana before they left on their honeymoon. And it has now arrived, and the storekeeper is bringing it into the little hut. He talks to Johnny, and they shoot the breeze for a few minutes, and then Johnny says, oh, by the way, would you like to say hello to Mahana? Oh, okay. He knows Mahana. He's known her from a child. You know, she is nothing. But he says, oh, okay. Now, out the door comes, as she opens the curtain, the most gorgeous woman you've ever laid your eyes on. I mean, your heart stops or takes an extra beat. It leaps. I mean, she is gorgeous, beautiful, long black hair. I have red hibiscus in her hair, a beautiful red dress, and takes your breath away. And the storekeeper says hello to Mahana, talks for a few moments, and then Mahana excuses herself and says, I need to go get some water, and leaves. The storekeeper turns to Johnny, and he says, what happened to Mahana? And Johnny says, well, it was the cows. The cows? Yes. Johnny said, I know what these women do. They go to the marketplace and they brag, well, I'm a poor cow wife myself. Well, my husband paid 5 cows for me. And he didn't want that. He said he didn't want that to happen for Mahana. He wanted her to be an 8-cow wife. And so he gave 8 cows for her. He wanted her to know that she was the most valuable woman on the island. And then Johnny turns to the storekeeper and he says, do you think I paid too much for her? Oh, no, the storekeeper said. I think you should have given more. And then Johnny says, the beauty of a woman is in how she feels about herself. And in her father's house, she thought she was nothing. But now she knows she's the most beautiful and most valuable woman on the island. And I say that to you tonight. The way your children feel depends upon what you sacrifice for them. time you spend with them to let them know they're valuable. Children spell love Time. And if you want to have an 8-cow kid, you got to give 8 cows for them. If you want to have an 8-cow woman, you better give 8 cows for her, or a man. It's what you sacrifice for the other that makes them feel the value of who they are. And aren't you glad that God didn't give just 8 cows for us? He gave his only begotten Son. Oh, how valuable we should feel, regardless of everything else. Give your children that knowledge of what has been given for them. Grow in your children's hearts a love for Jesus, who sacrificed his life for them. Let them be in personal relationship with the God of the universe, who had their destiny in his mind before they were even born. And let them know, no matter how they are treated, what they have in life, or how they look, they, in God's eyes, are the most valuable kid in the world. And we will have given them the supreme gift. Okay, what makes kids misbehave? Well, they want attention. What do you give them? You give them love. Fill up their love cups. They want to make choices. What do you give them? You allow them to make choices in a safe situation with boundaries, with limits. Very good, with limits. And you remember the strength. Third reason, they've got emotions. And they misbehave because those emotions are driving them to react. What do? You remember the iceberg. Use a little iceberg psychology on them. Diffuse the emotions, and the bad behavior will melt away. And finally, children misbehave because they don't feel they're worth anything. Let them know. Remember the jawbreaker. Let them know what those layers are in terms of self-concept. But most important, what the final coating is in terms of God's value of them. And when you can give your children these 4 things, you will significantly change their behavior from bad to good, from obnoxious to precious. And I know you can do it, because God can give you what you need at those times if you just ask him. Let's talk to him right now. Father in heaven, thank you for today. Thank you for all the things that we have learned. And thank you, Lord, that you accept us as your children just the way we are. Thank you for your love to us, for your boundaries and your limits and your commandments to keep us safe, for allowing us to talk to you and share what's on our hearts, even though sometimes we're angry and frustrated. We know that you'll always listen to us. And Lord, thank you for giving us your Son, the ultimate sacrifice, so that we know exactly how valuable we are. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your family, and help us to know how to react and work with our children in such a way that we can all enjoy eternity together in heaven with you, for Jesus' sake. Amen.